Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome to episode 52 of Teach Play Disc Golf. I'm your host Antonio, and I am so happy to have you with me here today. I have a really fun and interesting show planned. So about a week or two ago, I saw in my email that PDGA had sent out an email with proposed rule changes that are going to be voted on fairly soon. And so I thought that we would go ahead and talk through some of the rule changes, mainly the major changes that are going to affect most amateur disc golfers. There's about 2 or 3 rules I just want to talk a little bit about, and then kind of give my thoughts on them, and hopefully where my thoughts on the direction of the sport, my thoughts on the direction of the rules, and kind of where all of that is going. So let's go ahead and let's get right into it. So last week, Thursday, June 12th, PDGA staff uploaded on their website an article, or a brief, I guess you could call it. PDGA members preview proposed rule changes for 2026. So everything that we're looking at and talking about here is not for the 2025 season, so we won't be dealing with any of these changes in the tournaments that we play, but we can experience these next year. Now, before getting into the details, some of the major and minor changes, I will say right off the bat that I actually think it's good that in the still fairly early stages of true competitive disc golf, in the sense of it's on YouTube, there's the Disc Golf Network, you have international events, international majors. I think it's good that disc golf is in a place where they realize the importance of updating the rules and making sure that those rules change with the game, okay? They're not the only sport to do this. The NFL continues to do this, and they've been around for a long time. The NBA continues to do this. So while disc golf is nowhere near the same, viewership and money as those major sports, that doesn't mean it's not important for them to continue updating the rules as play changes, as players improve, so on and so forth. So I will say the fact that they're doing this is very good. The fact that they do this every year is even better. Proposing rule changes, getting PDGA membership input, very, very important. So that being said, let's go ahead and let's talk through some of the rules. We're not going to look at all of these, okay, because there's a lot of detail in some of these that kind of hard to translate over podcasts, and then there are some that are also just like, okay, I mean, yeah, that's fine. And that's how I feel every year when I read through some of these, that I'm like, okay, I didn't realize this was a problem that needed to be fixed, but you do you, PDGA. Okay, so the first one, we're going to look at some of the major changes. The first one is Rule 801.02, enforcement: thrower no longer votes on determinations. Essentially, what that means is when the flight position or status of a disc is questionable, the determination is made by group vote. However, for the very first vote, the thrower does not participate. So if you have a card of 4, 3 people vote. If there's a card of 3, the 2 people would vote. If there's a card of 5, 4 people would vote. And that's important to know that number, because if there is a tie, like if there were 3 people, there obviously wouldn't be a tie. But if there's, 2 voters or 4 voters on a card of 3 or 5, if there's a tie after the first vote, the thrower must then vote in order to break the tie. This is just an example of one of the challenges that's facing disc golf right now is self-governance. Even this rule, while it's positioned to try and take away the thrower's opinion, there still has to be some input in the event of a tie, okay, on the vote. And I think that's just really uncomfortable for a lot of reasons, mainly being the thrower has to somehow manage either giving themselves the upper hand or the advantage, even if they think it's the right call, or setting themselves up with potentially a harder throw, an extra stroke, whatever it might be. And that has to do with self-governance, because you now have players impacting their play and how it affects the field. And that's just a really hard position to be in. Disc golf naturally tends that way because it is a smaller sport, because we don't have officials on every hole watching every throw. We don't have the cameras that like PGA, not PDGA, PGA has. I've never been a big golf person, but I think I watched a few holes of the Masters earlier this year, and the number of cameras and the incredible angles that they can get is phenomenal. I never really noticed that before. And as somebody who's watched disc golf for years now, I immediately noticed the difference. And I'll say that if disc golf had the cameras and the angles and the ability to have a cameraman 150 feet in the air watching everything and having multiples of those, obviously I think the whole self-governance would be able to go away on the Pro Tour. But at the end of the day, I still think that's necessary. It's a necessary evil. You have to have somebody or a way to enforce the rules, but you also want to try and keep it fair. And self-governance is the best way to do that. And this rule tries to help mitigate or avoid that awkwardness that I think a lot of players would feel voting on a decision that impacts their throw. Helps eliminate some of that. Of course, if there's a tie, then they would be part of the call. Overall, I like that. There's a lot of crossed out text here in regard to like examples and that kind of thing. And I think that's one of the most important things when making new rules is that a new rule should be simplifying understanding. And I think with this one, that makes the most sense and tries to keep things as calm and civil and keep the card moving on. The second rule, and I think this is a pretty interesting one, is 802.03. Excessive time, more time allotted on the fairway, better defining when the clock starts. So they come right out and say the 30-second rule is outdated and an update to the amount of time needed to complete a throw is necessary. So ultimately, the big thing here is that players should not be taking an excessive time to make a throw. Now, what is excessive? There's definitely some discussion about what is excessive. Some people would say if I throw or putt within a minute, that's a good amount of time. Other players would say that if you're taking more than 10 or 15 seconds to putt, that's excessive time. And you can sit there and time 30 seconds and say, wow, that's a long time. But in the moment of things, sometimes 30 seconds can go by really, really quickly. And so the way PDGA is working this and clarifying what is excessive time is that the tee area, a drop zone, or within 20 meters of the target, the player has 30 seconds to throw. I think that's fair. Think about it. Especially, well, not even for the Pro Tour, but any tournament, most players playing a tournament have some familiarity with the course, or they at least are familiar with competition, right? Well, you get up to a tee area, and most tees are going to be concrete. They're going to be well-defined, not going to be an issue. Pretty simple where you're throwing, whether it's a landing zone or what have you. You don't really need more than 30 seconds, even if it's really, really windy or even if it's raining. Like needing more than 30 seconds on the tee area or a drop zone, which is like a secondary tee area, makes sense. And then that third part within 20 meters of the target, 20 meters is probably somewhere around that 70 to 75 foot range. Most players are going to jump putt that. Doesn't mean that they're good jump putters, but most players are at least going to lay that up or jump putt it. And I think that with an unencumbered 20-meter approach to the basket, that is completely fair to have 30 seconds. Obviously, if you're in the woods, I've been on cards where someone has been really stuck in the woods and they're in a tight lie. Sometimes that individual has been me. I have always found the card to be very generous and totally chill with somebody is sitting in the middle of a thorn bush. I'm not going to call them on a time, a time call or whatever, because I understand that is a really obstructive lie to have, and they're working through a lot right now physically and mentally. And so I've never seen somebody say, oh, you took 35 seconds instead of 30, and give them a courtesy violation or like give them a warning. I think most players would be fine with that. And so within 20 meters of the target, no obstacles in the way, 30 seconds is plenty. The secondary part to this is that when making a throw from any other lie, the player has 45 seconds to throw. Honestly, that means basically you're off the fairway or you're on the fairway. Your lie could be rocky, sandy, muddy, slippery. You could be standstill on some sticks. You know, there are lots of lies that you can have that would just be a little precarious, and you want to be careful. And I think 45 seconds is fair. It gives you a little bit of extra time without feeling the pressure to throw too fast and potentially hurt yourself. Now, here's what I think is interesting is when does that allotted time begin? Because that's always the thing is like some people might say, okay, that person threw and now your time has started. It's like, well, some people aren't even at their lie yet. So that's not really fair. But then it's also like, okay, do we wait for you to take 30 seconds to pick a disc out of the bag and then that's when the time? So here's what it says the allotted time begins. It says the previous player has thrown and the player is next in the throwing order, and the player has determined the location of their lie, and the player has addressed their lie, meaning they've walked up to it, they've set their bag down, whatever, and the playing area remains clear. I emphasize those ands, not just because that's what I'm saying, but that's how the rules are stated. You have to have these 5 criteria for the allotted time to begin. Okay. And that's really important because you don't want somebody to start, if someone's really keeping time, start keeping that time at the wrong time because that's going to mess you up. And addressing the lie, it's further explained here as marking the lie, placing a supporting point on the lie, executing a pre-shot routine, rangefinder, checking the wind, clearing casual obstacles, testing the ground and footing. So pretty much things that we all do in some capacity. We may not do all of those things, but we do some of those. That's addressing the lie. Essentially, addressing the lie means you've come up to your lie and you are trying to figure out the best way to execute this shot and the different things that you do. So I think that's a fair rule, the 30 to 45 seconds. I think in a way that within 20 meters of the target, the player's 30 seconds is essentially saying, putting 30-second rule, you need to stick to it. Because especially at the Pro Tour level within 20 meters, that's a putt, easy. Even for most amateurs, they're at least putting that's edge of C2, right? I think I said 70, 75 feet earlier. That I'm definitely off on that. It's probably closer to 65 feet. But within 20 meters would be inside of circle 2. So no more than 30 seconds to execute your putt. I think that's fair. Yeah. The next couple of rules. So there are a couple other major changes like provisional throws and team play, but not really things that I want to get into here. What I actually want to go to now are some of the minor changes for the official rules of disc golf. So we have, interesting here, Rule 801.02, enforcement, clarification of tournament officials' authority, clarification regarding disqualification. A tournament official or official is a person who is authorized by the director to make judgments regarding the proper application of the rules during play. An official's ruling does not need to be confirmed to be enforced and supersedes any group calls or decisions. So that last part right there, the and supersedes any group calls or decisions, is the new ruling here, the new thing that they would add. I definitely think that's interesting. Obviously, for the most part, this is not going to affect most amateur players, in my opinion. I think I've maybe been on one card in one instance where we got the TD's opinion on something, and that was because the hole we were playing was right near the tent. Like, to me, getting the tournament director involved or a tournament official involved is a lot of work, and it can slow down a lot of other people. and we try to give benefit of the doubt that they have prepped the course and prepped the rules and the players meeting to inform us of everything. Most amateurs, I think, are trying not that they're actively avoiding contacting the tournament director, but they're really just saying like, hey, we can figure this out, right? There's 3, 4, 5 of us, even additional caddies, 8, 10 people sometimes, depending if everyone has a caddy on the card. We're smart enough to figure this out. So I think this may have to do with a little bit higher level competition, maybe at more A tiers, maybe not so much B and C tiers. It makes sense, but at the same time, my question is like, if the group made a call or a decision, why was the tournament official pulled in? So that would be the one thing here that the tournament official's ruling does not need to be confirmed to be enforced, and it supersedes any group calls or decisions. My question is, why would the tournament official be making a call if the group made the call? So that's kind of where I'm at with that. That's a little confusing to me, and there's no clarification there, but that's how it is. So I would just say, if you're playing in an event where this comes up, I would just encourage you to make sure that you try and get it resolved on your card before getting any officials or tournament director involved. This makes sense to me. Rule 80301, moving obstacles, clarifying the definition of casual obstacle. Basically, any item or collection of loose debris that's not part of the course, that's not intentionally placed there, that's not embedded in the playing surface, you can move. And it has to be that you can move it quickly and easily by yourself. You can't get help. Okay? If someone puts a railway tie in the middle of the course, kind of creating like an elevated ground area around the basket, you can't move that because it's been intentionally placed there as part of the course. But if there's a stick, like I just played in a tournament this past weekend, there was a giant dead branch in the middle of my lie, and I was able to move it by myself, and I did that, and because it was dead, unattached, and in the way, I was able to move it because it was on top of my lie. I met all these rules here, even with the old reading. So honestly, that makes a lot of sense to me. This is just a minor change, but I think it is great because it shortens the rule a lot. It clarifies things, keeps it simple, keeps us moving on. The next one is 805.02, disc above 2 meters. I hate the 2 meter rule. I don't know how many of you have played with the 2 meter rule. I have before. Only in one event that happens every year over in Longview, Texas. They're like one of the only places, I think, outside of California that actually still enforce the 2 meter rule at their tournaments, or at least they did at this one course. I just played another tournament from them in March, and they didn't enforce it there. But the 2 meter rule basically says if your disc comes to rest above 2 meters, so around 6 feet, a couple inches above, so about above your head for the average height male, that disc is OB, and it's an OB stroke. Essentially, you play from where it is below, but you take a stroke. One of the dumbest rules. I think it originated in California. I understand with maybe the trees there, it adds a layer of difficulty, so on and so forth. It forces you to reconsider throwing over the top, okay? But I just don't think it's a good one. It's annoying. And yeah, like nobody wants to get their disc stuck in a tree, and to go and add a bogey stroke onto that is just really annoying to me. The only other thing that I want to share are just some of my thoughts on something that recently happened. So we had the Preserve Championship up in Minnesota, and it was a Preserve Championship. Okay, she dropped out of the USW DGC. Now, there's been a lot of news going around about Kona and Allie Smith and that whole debacle that happened, where Allie wasn't apparently present to make a decision on it. she had stepped away for a second, which is technically against the rules. Like, you have to be moving with your card. You have to see. And then at the time that she was gone, Kona called a foot fault on someone, and Allie wasn't there to review it. And so then Kona gave a courtesy violation. And that's kind of just my quick general understanding of how all of that went down. And Allie, I think, finished the round, or didn't finish the round, but she dropped out. And then she's also since dropped out of the USW DGC. Coming to find out, there's some family health things going on with her mom. And so that could have been part of why she wasn't with the card, if she was checking her phone, whatever, what have you. But all that to say, I can see both player sides here. You have one player in Kona who, as she posted about, is just enforcing the rules. Like, she's not trying to be a jerk or anything about it, but like, this is the rule. We were trying to vote on this and you were nowhere to be found, or you weren't present to make a call. So that's really frustrating when it's a self-governed sport. Even at the pro level, a lot of times most cards don't have cameras on them, and now all of a sudden you're trying to do something. So that's really frustrating for her. But also for Allie Smith, it's like, how many times has that actually happened, that the moment somebody looks away, that they, that there's a foot fault and then the card's voting on a call? It just seems like so random to happen, because we also hear it all the time from amateurs and pros. Like, when they're playing, you might be watching someone throw, or you might be talking to your caddy while someone's throwing, but you're trying to not disturb them and everything. And it's just like, doesn't mean you're watching them close enough to know if there was a foot fault, or to know where exactly the disc might have gone. So I think that there's also seems to be a little bit of gray area in what it means to be paying attention and aware, because most players have admitted that they're not watching every single player throw every single shot with the intent of seeing if they're following the rules every single time. That's exhausting, and that's a lot to do. So I don't think that's happening. So it's very just interesting, this whole debacle. It's unfortunate for disc golf, because it seems like this kind of stuff pops up every now and again. And I don't know that having officials everywhere would solve it necessarily, because then the officials would start making the calls, and then you have to start questioning, like, or are they properly trained? How are we expecting one single person to watch every single throw of every single player, when most sports have multiple referees and multiple umpires and all that stuff? So like, it just starts to kind of send you down a spiral. And so there's really no perfect solution, no perfect answer for this. But the silver lining, I guess we can say, is that rules are getting changed, rules are updating, and players are becoming more aware and more verbal. Because, it might be that the solution is people actually just start calling things. The solution might be that players actually start making calls. That way, it's a comfortable thing for everyone to do. That probably would take a long time to build momentum, but it's definitely possible that that could be the route that we're going on. Like, hey, this is a self-governing sport, and players need to start making those calls. Now, that's kind of ignoring the psychological element of it, and the, just discomfort that can be felt on a card if somebody makes a call. So definitely just have to be careful about something like that. If that's the direction the sport is wanting to go, and really pushing players to make that call, that can definitely be causing more harm than good, especially for players who are newer to playing tournaments and all that stuff, who might overdo it, who might not do it enough. Definitely a weird spot to be in, but updating these rules is an important step in getting to the point where we can hopefully one day have a really good solution. And the thing about sports is, as the athletes get better, the rules got to change, the rules have to adjust, and hopefully there becomes enough money and publicity and eyes on the sport to get to where we can start to reduce some of these challenges, but that's always going to happen. You see in every other major sport in the United States, they're constantly dealing with officiating, they're constantly dealing with rule changes. That's never going to go away no matter how big the sport gets. It's just a matter of reducing some of the friction that we seem to experience year in and year out. But those are all kind of my thoughts, guys. This is obviously a different type of episode than I've done before, going over rule changes like this, but I think it's important to discuss them and just kind of share like initial thoughts, what I've been thinking about over the last week as I've, had the time to, kind of think about these on and off, and just, the future of disc golf with all of that. So let me know in the comments below what you think about some of these rules. Maybe also what are some rules that you would want to have changed. If you are a PDGA member, you do have the opportunity to vote on a lot of these things. That's one of the benefits of being a member, is having say in these rule changes. But that's all I have for you today, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I just want to sign off here and say, remember to teach someone how to play disc golf this week, whether it's taking them to the course, giving them a brand new disc, just sharing a good word out on the course. That's super important. Building that great community that we all fell in love with and continuing that trend. Make sure you yourself go out there and play some disc golf this week. Have some fun, whether it's in the woods, park style, whatever it may be, a solo round or with some buddies. Have a good time playing disc golf this week, everybody, and until next time, have a great round. Whew. That sign-off's a little rough. I haven't done an episode in a month, but hey, that's okay. I'll see you guys next time.